Tough questions. What is the meaning of life for you? Why BIM may be the question I should ask, and everybody will be addressing. Well, you guys can still ask questions by typing Slido, and the meeting number is 5571. And I can still take questions through Slido. In the meantime, I received a lot of questions. Thanks for those contributors. Okay, let's start with Mark. Mark, crowd is wondering the next steps for the certification and the roadmap, actually, because you mentioned the level 1 and the next steps and the roadmap and the timeline.
Yeah, okay.
Is it open?
So we have actually still a lot of work on this individual qualification because we're going to be releasing more modules. So we're hoping for at the beginning of next year we'll have a module for COBE, that's for facility management, facility managers, for energy analysis, for owners. So next year we'll have a lot of modules coming out for individual qualification. And also there are many countries that are still adopting the program. So there's a lot of work there. But I know the interest is really phase 2, professional certification. That's what everyone's looking for. And it's going to be hard to pin me down. The team says 12 months, I'll say 18 months. 18 months, then professional certification should be sort of on the market. But it's early days to define that.
Okay, we are just at the beginning, right? Okay, this question is for Rob. Is the environmental impact check the same with the material passport used in Netherlands?
There is a material passport going on. It's called Madaster. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's about it's a commercial initiative with a very charismatic organization. So this environmental check is mandatory to get a permit to build. So it's by law. This one is by law. The other one is a good initiative.
Okay. The next one is for Lars. So since IFC files are huge, are we giving up the use of IFC by adapting data templates?
No.
Thank you. Can you elaborate that? Yeah.
Just let me clarify. I mean, IFC is great for its purpose, but the issue is that the construction industry, if you look at other industries, you keep the geometry and the information separate. But we kind of mixed everything together, and that's why we have a big mess. So if you need information in the process, you just do it, use it. It's good, but it's just understand that those templates is meant to help you in several environments, not only in, let's say, in the BIM environments.
Can I add something to that? Also, like speaking as an architect and working in a native environment, also the recommendation there is the same, that you have your models are basically placeholders. So you define your objects at a very, very simple level, with simple geometry, and the information is then stored separately in a separate database. And I think you can see IFC the same way, that IFC is kind of the container, the placeholder, and then you have this other product information in the product data sheets and product data templates. So it's consistent, yeah.
So also depends if you're talking about just the design process or operations. So very often operations is facility management tools, which could use a viewer, and IFC is perfect for that.
Okay. This one is for Mark. How is the process of being a training provider?
The process to be registered. So so it occurs through the chapters. So a training provider will apply to a chapter. It's actually an international recognition. So you can actually a training provider can apply to any chapter, but we encourage, for example, Turkish organizations to apply through the Turkish chapter, and essentially you just submit your curriculum. So we have 16 learning units that have to be covered to address the learning outcomes So we define these learning outcomes, and you have to submit that. And then there's a number of declarations. So it's basically filling out forms. It's not a huge amount, but a declaration of confidentiality to show that you are a registered training provider, that you have experience with BIM, or personnel have experience with. So it's essentially a completing a form process. We don't review the course content. We just sort of ask you to certify your capability. What we do, though, is we keep a check on all the training providers. All the tests are, we have the central data at buildingSMART International, so we can see how students are performing. And for example, if we see that the students of a particular training provider are failing, so if more than 30% fail, then that training provider will get a warning. And if that continues to be the case, with too many students failing over a 6-month period, then the approval, the registration is removed from that training provider. So that's the process.
Rob, during our quick chat before your presentation, you were saying the adoption of Open BIM, mainly BIM, is from bottom up in Netherlands. You said because we can make money out of that. Can you give more examples about how the best way of, or the proper way of, the proper steps of it?
Yeah, well, people are losing money in the construction industry. Everybody knows that, and that's because we're not transparent. We make a lot of mistakes which need to be replaced in the actual situation. So, for instance, the basic information delivery specification I was mentioning, it was made by 10 competitive contractors together to be more efficient and to make more money. So, and they wanted to standardize because their architects, the architects they are working with, they are using various kind of software. So the push came from the contractors, not from the architects, not from the owners, but the contractors were tired of dealing with all those models coming from the architects and the engineers with a lot of mistakes. So they developed this open BIM approach, which helped the total industry to be more, to earn more money in the end. So that, I think that's a very good example. And now it's translated in over 10 languages. So the same situation is going on everywhere. But I think that more in Holland, because we have to, we are lean and mean. And well, that's what we try to. and green
Lean,
as
mean,
well.
and green at the same time. Yeah.
Well, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that will do. Lars, is there any project to have one international classification system that you've been to? No.
No. So just to clarify, in all the standards we have for pumps or for insulation or concrete or walls or floors or whatever, there is a definition of a type. So it's called a window, or it's called a clay masonry unit, which is a brick. So the type definition is already in the standards. So when we talk about classification and a BIM execution plan, normally what people have done is that they just invented something and they name it and they call it classification. So this is a big mistake that people do, that they kind of invent their own stuff. So that's normally an Excel spreadsheet where they name a lot of things, which is the assets or rooms or whatever. So in some cases it's good, but mainly this is the most important thing, is to understand that classification is good, but only to a certain level. And this is, the understanding there is a fine balance to understand where the data templates actually come in and don't. It's on the product level.
Okay. This question for all of you folks. How do you see the future? The short term, the long term, and your vision? Let's start with Rob.
Okay, so when it comes to open standards, I foresee that IFC will improve faster than the past 10 years, but everybody can say that, I guess. I think that we will move away from one big IFC standard, that we will have various standards. for different purposes. A little bit comparable to what Mark explained about model view definition, so subsets of total models. I foresee that we are moving towards digital twins, like Lars mentioned, where machine-readable data and artificial intelligence will be more and more important. Our economy is growing tremendously. People are higher educated, but don't want to do the boring stuff anymore. So we have machines to we have machines and computers to do that. We should use the unlimited cloud computing power in our BIM processes.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. What's the future, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I ask you, because I collect the answers and make my own.
So, I mean, what I think is fascinating about digitalization, and BIM is the digitalization of the construction industry, and that is that we don't really know what's going to happen. There are indicators. You know, we talk about big data analysis, cloud computing, Internet of Things. So I think we're going to see this kind of these kind of developments in BIM, definitely. But what happens is technology is developed, and then people's usage patterns change, and so that's something you can't predict. You know, if we think about something like Google Maps, when it came, it was essentially, back then it was just a digital map, but now it's linked to what we do. They collect data from us. They know that this store, or there's a lot of traffic here with Google Maps, or they know that this store is being visited a lot at these points in time because of our usage patterns. So it's a two-way thing, and it's so hard to predict that. But I think what we're going to see, and my hope, my vision, is that we get away from these big sort of concepts or software companies that are trying to sort of determine the future, and that we have more kind of little versatile apps that anyone can create an app for cost estimation, or anyone can create an app for exporting, for clash detection, and that we have this sort of a very sort of versatile and dynamic way of working. So that's sort of my vision.
Yeah, depends a little bit on where you stand, but I would say we will get away from the way that we work today, where it's on project. I build a project, and then you build a project, and then you build a project, and then you go. It's a very bad business model. So I think that will change. I think that, again, the information on what you are designing or what you are operating is going to be available, structured. So you know how many rooms, spaces, whatever you have that knowledge. I think that manufacturers and contractors will be closer built together, not going that much via merchants. I will talk about that later today. I think that there will be marketplaces. I mean, I would rather maybe use the word platforms, like platforms where manufacturers and contractors actually just have a hub on where to do delivery, and where to send assets, data back and forth, logistics, everything. It's going to change the way that we distribute products, since we will have manufacturers stronger. The merchants will not be that strong, so the manufacturers will have more information from clients and contractors, which they don't have today. And I think by introducing more data and knowledge, that we could use better technologies that is available today. So they're there, but we can't use it because we don't have structured information, let's say.
So the next question is also for you, Lars. How do we attract talent to construction industry for achieving Amazon type of industry?
Okay.
There you go.
I'm very so we are some people here which is very fixed on education, because I think it's sad to have young people looking at our industry, not seeing, let's say, looking at the industry with our eyes, when in reality it's a very exciting industry. So to be attractive, I think by by 2021, that's my personal view, we will have a transformation of the industry. And I think that is where we will attract more young people, which we need. But to be honest, with the processes and the way that we're behaving, it's like boring. We're not a very exciting industry as of today. We have a lot of exciting companies, but as an industry, we are not like the IT guys, which is much more interesting. My personal opinion.
How do you? This is for Rob. How do you think the construction site experience will change and transform in the project?
I think it's it's an extension of the previous question.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic company in the US. It's Katera. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's an IT organization. And well, really, they don't have any function titles, and they attract a lot of people because people can play around there, and they own product platforms. So they do a lot of prefabrication. Robotizing on site. So the construction industry will change and benefit from it. I expect that prefabrication and cradle to cradle will be more and more important. So we will have nicer, cleaner, better organized construction sites. People will wear devices like HoloLenses and so to construct, to have access to the BIM model, which will result in better buildings and less accidents. And take a look at those companies that are changing. And 2021 it's around the corner. Maybe it will take a little bit longer, but
it's a wake-up call.
It is. Yeah.
Since this one is for Mark, since you wrote a book about a BIM manager, what type of skills a BIM manager should have, and how do you define it?
Yeah, so that's also an interesting question, because there's a sort of a short-term view and a long-term view, and I think sort of in the short-term view, the BIM manager, also that varies from country to country, but this person who sort of drives BIM within a company, that's what I mean with the BIM manager, has to be a bit of an all-rounder. So they have to be someone who has a deep sort of knowledge of construction, because that's our industry, but also to understand computer science to a sense. They have to have a role as project management and structured way of working is critical. Communication. So it's a little bit of an all-rounder. That's what they need to be.
May I add to
please,
that?
Please
yeah,
do.
I think it's today it's more linked to the design build process, but I think a BIM manager will be more linked to purchasing, sustainability, and I mean some of the key goals for the projects, not only to the let's say to the BIM where we are today.
This one is for Rob. Is there going to be any clarification in ISO 19650 for the level of information need? It's missing and not complete. That's what the question says.
Okay. I'm wondering who that asked. You did. Okay. Maybe we can discuss it later, but more in depth. I think I read the question as well. You were speaking about LODs as well. Maybe you could.
Well, yeah. So because I mean, I'm also involved with this CNTC 442, not in the level of information need, but that's a huge topic. And as you pointed out, so the topic level of information need is defined in ISO 19650, but not further. And actually, that's why we're seeing all these other standards coming that they're building on top of that. And so this is an actual discussion now, and there's a pre-standard has been released, and there will be a set of standards. But what it's probably not going to do is define it in the sense that it was previously. If we think of the origins of the LO, level of development definition from the American Institute of Architects, that talked about 100, 200, 300. That's the ISO is not going to give that. They're going to define. There is a requirement for information that an owner has to specify, and that includes geometrical information, that includes non-geometrical information, that includes documents. And it'll have some guidelines about how that's defined, but then what we'll see, even with these new standards, it'll still be a little unclear, and then it's up to every nation to define what is the classification code that they're using, and what are the project phases. So, in short, there will be further clarification, but it won't answer all our questions.
Comment on that one also. My experience is that when you develop the time stages, it depends on who you're talking to. So an example would be, we're working with a large contractor, 1,500 projects, and a window manufacturer. So what information do the window manufacturer need from the contractor? So that's a use case of its own. So then the window manufacturer will tell you, I need information then and then. So firstly, I need to plan my production, so I just need some project information, very little. It's a school, it has blah, 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 distance to the road and things like that. And then later down the road, I will need more information. So it depends on where you are and who you are. So to set that in stone, I think it's very difficult. And also on the information level, so my experience is that we're talking about use cases and / purposes. So I think that if you have a purpose of, actually, I want to send the information so you can produce and give me a price, that's a purpose. So that links kind of, that's an information package that you assign to a timeline, which is just easy. And then you just do it. So it's not like, to standardize this, to say that everything is the same thing and we will do this like this, it's kind of hard, I would say.
Rob, can we analyze and optimize the proof of concept with abstract building models without elements defined, such as mass models in Revit?
Yes, I guess so. We developed voxel technology, which that technology is able to analyze a model and to see, for instance, the outer environments of the model. So we implicate that it's walls. If there's a hole, then we implicate that it's a window. So yes, we are doing that already. Yeah. So without any classification or whatever, just even from SketchUp models, very simple models. Yeah.
Okay. I believe this question is both for Mark and Rob, because it's trying to get more information about the case studies, building smart case studies. How do you develop case studies, the process of it?
So it's a real case study, you mean, or a use case?
You publish use case, may address it better actually, use cases, because you publish use cases in order to penetrate the entire market. Yeah. And I believe that's the crowd wants to hear, how do you develop the use cases?
Okay, that's a really fascinating topic for a number of reasons. One, because it's actually an initiative that's been started by buildingSMART Switzerland, but parallel in many, many countries. And I think Lars picked up really well. The use case, it defines the scope of BIM on a project. It defines the level of detail that you need. So the first thing you need to do is you say, I'm building a school. Well, what are the use cases? Do you want to do energy analysis, structural analysis, logistic planning? And the use cases, they will define the information need. So these are really, like, a use case is the other side of LOIN, basically. And what's happening now, it's really an international initiative. So what we're doing is, in buildingSMART, is creating sort of a list of use cases. And what we're finding is that there are groups of so you can have use cases that relate to infrastructure works, or use cases that relate to general construction. And within that, then you have subgroupings, use cases that relate to model coordination. Mm-hmm. And examples of that would be rule-based checking, clash detection, and so forth. So in the first case, we're just listing out all the possible use cases, and this will be extended, and providing a definition, a plain language definition. What does model-based checking mean in multiple languages? Very quick. So when the owner says, I want model-based checking, everyone knows what that means. Mm-hmm. And The second step is to define a standardized process. And there's a couple of standards, very important standards that I didn't mention. One of them was IFD, buildingSMART Data Dictionary. The other one is, it's a bit technical, so I didn't say it. It's the Information Delivery Manual. But this is a key activity from this use case management, is to describe what is the standard process for example, rule-based checking. Who are the actors? We have an owner. We have maybe a local municipality for the checking. We have an architect. And what do these people do, and what information is exchanged from one to the other? So we have a use case. Then we have this so-called Information Delivery Manual, this process. And the output of that is the exchange requirements, is the level of detail, the level of information need. So use cases goes through process to give us the level of information need.
Thanks. And to make a little bit of commercial or advertisement for the case studies, sorry, which you mentioned. In buildingSMART International, we have a yearly program where you can send in your BIM projects, and then the rest of the world can learn from those experiences, and from those stories we create use cases as well. So that's really interesting.
So you define case study, a use case includes an ROI study. How do you call it that way? The case study with the return on investment plus a use case is called a case study. Can you define it that way? Not really?
Well, it's the case study that is being delivered. Well, you have to fill in a lot of questions. So how was the program run, and which software was used? How did you specify an information delivery manual? Did you have your requirements ready? And then then you have to submit your IFCs, and so they can rebuild the process of how the construction was built eventually.
Okay. Let me check. There was a new question on the line. Well, I guess I'm done. Okay. Lars, you want to mention
just want to add on the use case. So the work that with buildingSMART and GS1, one of the case studies that we're doing is that we're getting the large manufacturers together in a room with the large clients/contractors and trying to understand how we can use IFC, IFD, which is the dictionary and the data templates with that, and how we can then automate processes so that salespeople are not necessary anymore, so that we can get the right data in the same format, always given from the client/contractor to the manufacturer, and for that information to be machine readable. So the return of investments, which you just commented on, is very important, because what we see is that we see a reduction of price, which is very important, from the manufacturer, because the manufacturer gets data from 1,500 projects. He's never done that before, because this is run by people on projects, and they seem very often they buy products from who they want. So it's a change, and that also drives more efficient, because now the manufacturers get in earlier, so they can advise on better solutions for environmental impact, or for better solutions. And then when the manufacturers then get involved earlier, then we get a better outcome, and that we don't get the time stress that we normally get. So there's a lot of things which on these use cases which we then are writing case studies on. And this is done now in these projects with buildingSMART and GS1.
Well, there's one question actually for you, Lars. Since Nordic countries are very well, their reputation is very well defined for Nordic countries in terms of BIM or open BIM, shall I say. What do you make in a different way? What's the difference in Nordic countries? The people, the culture, the education system?
Thank you. Yeah. So basically, we have a very flat way of we don't have a hierarchy like the French guys. They have a levels, and also where I have a business in Bulgaria.
Now I need to find a French guy then.
So no, anyhow, so we have a very flat way of communicating. So that's our way of behaving. So that's one. Number two is that we have agreed. So this is kind of exciting because we have agreed in Norway, Denmark, and now we hope to get the Swedes, and I think it's going to happen. And we developed common templates to be used by all 3 countries. And that's exciting because that suddenly has a big impact on the industry. So that all actors will use the same kind of data templates for designing windows, doors, floors, whatever. And that is published by the standardization organizations, which makes them standards. And this is what I also see in other countries. So I think that our approach is bottom up, but still it's done on an understanding that we need a common technical language in the industry, and that we should apply that by using the data template / IFD standard that could be used in these processes. So I think that the way that we are is that we want to work together, and we don't want to compete on this one.
Good. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time and all your energy and everything and presentations. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming to Istanbul. Hoş geldiniz. Thank you.